Hi, I'm Dr. Mitch Harlan, and welcome to the Truth Talks podcast. Ooh, today's episode, here we go. We got a special guest today. I got a whole lot of books in front of me, so our fingers are probably tired. We're going to introduce you all right now to Erin Baer. Erin, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm fantastic. So
Awesome.
you've done a lot of writing.
I have.
People who write a lot of stuff about a story is because they own a story. They have a story worth telling. And that is apparently what you have. Okay, we're going to be talking a little bit about your new book, You're More Than Your Sport, which we want everybody to see, go buy. Fantastic book. We have more books. We'll share a little bit more of that here a little bit later. Tell us your story.
Oh, where do you want me to begin?
Well, you usually start from the beginning.
Well, I was born with a twin sister, and my mom was actually pregnant. She had no idea that we were twins. And when she was in labor, they pulled me out first, and then they said there's at least one more. At least was my mom's focus. But instantly my dad and I became best of friends growing up. He was my rock. He was everything to me. He's still around, 89 years old. And he taught me the game of golf. That's what I had in my life to focus on because everybody focused on my twin sister. She was the pretty one, the smart one, the popular one. I was a skinny, scrawny kid that nobody liked. And so my dad taught me golf at 2 years old. And I focused on that. That became my first love, my first relationship, and my best friend. Along with my dad. Yep, golf, believe it or not.
I love golf too.
A sport that women aren't supposed to play, but a sport that I became really good at. So I hung on to it. I went to 4 different high schools, 3 different 8th grades, and just became a golfer. I put my whole identity into golf, Erin the Golfer, because I wanted to be seen by thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people.
And then there's a book.
There was a book, yes.
There was a book. So far, people just go golfing. People go golfing every day.
Yes.
But it doesn't end up being a story.
No.
Tell us a story.
So it's actually not the book that we just talked about, You Are More Than Your Sport. That book came a lot later before my first book. I never really wanted to write a book. I had problems pronouncing my S's and Z's. I was told I was stupid, that I was no good at grammar. And they always ripped me out of phonics and language arts and English when I had speech class. So I was always told that I was a horrible writer, that it needed a lot of work. And I believed that. I believed that story. I believed what I was told growing up. So in 2018, God said, hey, you're going to write your story. I said, no, I'm not. I'm like,
You're not supposed to tell God no, by the way.
yeah, I know. Well, He pushes. And he kept telling me, hey, you're going to write your story. And I said, nope, not a writer, not a good writer. And there's no way I'm telling my story. But I didn't realize that I had manifested writing my book in 2017 when the Me Too movement hit. I went on Facebook Live and finally came clean about a story that we'll talk about later. And then in 2019, God said, hey, I'm done. You're not ignoring me anymore. You're going to write your book. So I wrote my first book in 4.5 months. And it became a movement. We can talk about that later. But then fast forward to 2022, I was invited to my alma mater, Rockhurst University in Kansas City. Mm-hmm. And they said, hey, we want you to come out and talk to our students. Well, I wanted to talk about a different book, my second book. But they said no. I said, well, what am I supposed to talk about? And they said mental health. And I was like, what? Mental health and your golf story. I said, okay. So I had a panic. But I went on stage and over 250 student athletes showed up that day to hear my story about navigating life as a college athlete. So I told that story, and the counseling had an uptick in attendance after my talk. And I knew that it needed to be a book. So I transcribed that book into You Are More Than Your Sport, put it on hold, and wrote a third book. I was like, okay, it's time to write You Are More Than Your Sport. So I wrote it and sent it to my publisher, and she says, it's not done. It's not finished. You have to add more. I was like, what? I have to add more? I have to write? So I wrote more, added reflections. And then in the process of publishing, I told my husband and my publisher, I'm going to get a professional athlete to endorse this book. I just want one. My husband's like, Deion Sanders. I'm like, he's too busy. I don't care about him. Sorry, Deion, if you're listening. But then I met Nate, and I met Monte Ball, and I met Robert Gallery, and I met Quincy Jones, and they all loved my story. And the book became a lot more and a lot bigger than I ever could imagine.
Let's get into it. Tell us a story.
So as I mentioned earlier, golf is my whole identity. I was going to be Erin the Golfer. Nothing could stop me. Nothing could get in my way. And as a child, in athletes, you're told to stay strong, to be brave, and to hold it all together. And we think we're invincible. We think nothing can possibly happen or knock us off that pedestal. So I worked really hard at the sports. I practiced and practiced and practiced, even though my parents would never come to a golf meet. They would never watch me. They would never take me to practice. Every summer I'd go see my dad and I'd practice every single day. I had a group of the men's club from Verdugo Hills that supported me. They would play the loop, which was 4 holes in from the clubhouse and back, out and in. And they loved me. They loved watching my swing. I had great mentors. I had Dan and I had Dan and Dick. They were amazing. And they just would always give me these pointers. And so I tried out for the men's golf team in California and I made it. They couldn't really say no, right? When they didn't have a women's team. So I made the team. And then I moved sophomore year and I tried out for the team and I made the team, but it was a women's team and I became number 1. So I was not liked at all. And then I moved again to Florida, became number 1. And then moved again my senior year and became number 1. And I was determined I was going to get a golf scholarship because I knew that golf scholarship was my ticket out. It was my ticket out from hell of what I've gone through in my life. It was my way of becoming who I was meant to be.
Give us a taste of that. What were you running from?
I was running from being compared to my twin sister. I was running from being told I wasn't good enough. I was running to whoever I was supposed to be. And so I received a golf scholarship in college and I was on top of the world and I figured I had it all. But you forget that there's a life after, after school, after college. And freshman year, I let my ego get the best of me during a tryout for a tournament. So in college golf, you're playing with the best of the best on your own team, right? So in high school, you're number 1 and you're playing against 2, 3, 4s, and 5s. In college, you're number 1 with number ones, playing against number 1s. So you don't become the best. You try, right? You try to be the best. But then you got to try out for each tournament for the following week. And so I was trying out and I was nailing every shot. I mean, you could not pay me to make a bad shot. And the front 9 was fabulous. I was like, yes, I've got this in the bag. It's a hole-in-one kind of practice game. Coach is going to love this. And I get to hole number 10. I hit my drive a little to the right. I'm like, oh, no big deal. There's a hill. It'll roll. It's fine. Throw my bag on my back, go to my shot, and it's under a tree. I'm like, oh, it's fine. Ego, right? We're going to be a hero because that's what athletes do. We have to figure it out and we have to keep it together. Well, I ended up snapping my wrist on my next shot. And I played the rest of the round injured, letting go of the club every single time. And I kept it together. I didn't cry. And I got up to the clubhouse and I had a good score. And coach saw right through me. And he was like, what's wrong, Erin? I said, nothing, coach. Nothing's wrong. He's like, I want you to stay after. I was like, oh, no.
Yeah. No one wants to stay after.
I was like, oh, great. He's like, I want to talk to you, Erin. I said, okay. Called me EB. It's like, EB, we got to talk. And he goes, something's wrong. I was like, nope. I want to play in the next tournament. He goes, what happened? I said, well, I got hurt, but it's no big deal. It was a big deal. I got hurt really, really bad. And I begged coach on that patio at that clubhouse, please let me play. I've been working so hard, coach. Don't take this away from me. This is all I know. This is all I am. And he goes, I can't let you play unless you get cleared by the sports therapist. So go to the sports therapist. And I went. And I had this internal dialogue with myself and probably God. And, the negotiation starts, right? Hey, let me be okay. And if I'm okay, then I'll do this or I won't do that. And test after test and wincing through all the different things at that sports therapist, I was told, hey, you can't play. And I said, oh, just, how long? How long am I out? He's like, the whole season. And I was devastated.
So everything you'd been running from, everything you had accomplished now comes with something that you weren't planning for.
No.
Because golf, you were planning on your escape.
Mm-hmm.
Now that the escape is coming to an end. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So I kept together and I had to go to coach and said, hey, coach, I'm out. I'm out for the season. And he says, okay, well, get better. I said, yeah, but I guess I'm not part of the team because I can't play. And coach looks me dead in the eye, and I'll never forget it. And he goes, you're a part of the team, Erin. It's a matter of how you show up. I was like, how I show up? Like, what does that mean? Like, I can't play, coach. And I thought about it, and I was like, okay, I'll show up to practice, and I'll be there for the girls, and I'll cheer them on. And I did. I showed up to every practice. I mean, I couldn't go to the tournaments because I was out. But I would motivate them and, shot after shot, cheer them on, putt after putt, walk the course with them and kind of keep their spirits, lifted. But I was dying inside. I hated it.
Of course.
I hated it because they would complain about, oh, got to practice again, or man, can't we get a break? And I'm sitting there like, I want to be doing what you're doing. And I don't know if I'm ever going to play again. I've got a cast on my hand and I don't know if I'm ever going to play. And you're sitting here complaining about something I love so deeply that was taken away. Like, how dare you, right? But I didn't tell anybody that. I kept it all inside. It got bad. It got really, really, really bad. I found out, my senior year into my freshman year, I had a heart condition, which I had no idea that I had a heart condition. It was misdiagnosed senior year in high school. And then freshman year was during finals. I was stressed. And I went to coach. I'm like, I can't take this. And he looks at me. He's like, I think, midterms. It wasn't finals just yet. It was midterms. And I go, I can't do this anymore, coach. I just don't know if I'm going to make it. And he goes, I think you need to talk to someone. I looked at him like, counseling? Really? No. I'm not going to go talk to someone. He's like, Erin, you're struggling with something. I said, yeah, but I'm supposed to be strong, coach. And he's like, when you're struggling with something, it's okay to ask for help. And you're brave and you're being courageous when you ask for help. I said, I'll go talk to someone. So I went to the counseling center, another internal dialogue. We have those internal dialogues when we just don't really feel that we're in control. Or at least for me, I do. Right. I mean, I don't know if anybody else does that, but I like to have control of everything. Many of my people in my life can vouch for that. So I went to counseling and I met with a female counselor and she was nice. We had a few sessions and then I walked into her office one day and we sat down and she told me, hey, I don't think we're a good fit. And I was like, what? Because I had been abandoned so many times in my life before.
Yeah.
And I felt betrayed once again by putting myself out there and it not working out. But then she interrupted my moment of probably disbelief and said, hey, I've got someone I want you to meet. And I was like, fine. But I'm a 19-year-old girl. Like, I have an attitude. I'm mad. I'm upset. I'm hurt. I don't know if I'm ever going to play golf again. I've got girls on the team that aren't appreciative of what they've got that has been taken away from me. And I'm being rejected by this counselor because I took the step to ask for help and she's rejecting me. Now what? Now what do I do? So she interrupts our session. We go and we meet this gentleman and he's this tall black man. And I'm looking down at the ground and I look up at him and I'm like, you want me to talk to this guy? I'm just this little white girl. Like, how do we even have any common ground? And she goes, so this is Dr. Darden. I was like, oh, hi, under my tone. I was like, hi, nice to meet you. He's like, hi, Miss Erin, how are you? And I'm like, fine. He goes, how about we go into my office? So my counselor, Karen, she leaves. And Dr. Albert Darden leads us into his office. And there in his office are 2 blue chairs. He says, how about you have a seat? So I literally climb into this blue chair, my feet up on the cushion, my knees up to my head, my arms wrapped around, and I put my head in my lap. And I sit there like that for the whole hour. And he's trying to get me to open up. But how can I trust a man that I've just been turned over to because I've just been betrayed by a counselor and I'm lost. I'm completely and utterly lost in who I am. Golf has been taken away. And if she couldn't help me, how is he going to help me?
And?
So I I sit like that for a whole hour, curled up in this blue chair, scared to death. And anytime I looked at him, he told me I looked like a scared little girl who's been sent to the principal's office. I thought he was going to put me down, belittle me, and tell me who was I to think, like, who am I to think that I could ever be a part of a team when I'm not contributing? Who am I to think I'm a somebody because I'm a nobody? Like, I thought he was going to just lay into me. But he
So that was your internal dialogue.
That was my internal dialogue. I was inside my head because she rejected me. So why would he want to give me the time of day to help me? And so at the end of the session, he says, how about we schedule another session? I hesitantly said yes. Something told me just go ahead and say yes and schedule. So I started seeing him on a weekly basis, while also physically healing from my injury and still showing up for the girls and motivating them and telling coach, what was going on. And finals came around. And I remember going down and talking to Dr. Darden, and then Bill Kriege is another man. He was a campus ministry guy. And I said, I'm not stressed, and ended up in the hospital that night. But realized I had gone there because I was crying out for help. Like, I couldn't hold the burden of keeping it all together anymore. And so Dr. Darden allowed me the safe space to deal with the baggage I had been carrying that was unrelated to golf. Here I am lugging all these golf bags of baggage, thinking if I can play well on the course, then the baggage doesn't matter. But at one point, you have to put down the baggage. You have to set it down. You have to open the zippers. You have to see what's inside. And though I was focused on my golf injury, he allowed me to pivot and focus on the baggage inside from my past, from my childhood. What was I running from? Who was Erin without golf? And he told me one time, Erin, you're a pearl. And I just about laughed in his face. I was like, no, I'm an onion. Because I told him I was an onion, like, we're peeling all these layers. Onions stink. They're horrible. They're terrible. And you're telling me I'm a pearl? Like, you're crazy. And that analogy of how a pearl is formed, I didn't understand until 20 years later. But it was a seed that he planted to let me know, like, hey, your life may be like an onion, but you are a pearl. And so he allowed me to say, hey, let's look in who Erin is. Because we're all just people. Mm-hmm. We do things, you're a doctor, you're a podcaster, but that doesn't define who you are. And so he told me to join an organization. I thought he was going to make me join a math club. I hate math, and I joined Plus. It was called Plus at the time. That's all I'm going to say. So if you want to know more, you got to read the book. But I finally discovered that I was so much more than the ability on the golf course. Golf was just my way of authentically allowing me to be me out there. Because if anybody ever plays golf with me, they'll see who I am and how I show up. And I always tell people, if you have gimmies in golf and you're not finishing your putt, then what are you not finishing in life? Finish the 2-inch putt. Do it. Don't.
I got a lot of stuff I haven't finished.
Yeah.
I'm always like, I'm not putting
right?
that.
Like, you got to finish the putt, because golf and being on the golf course is very much like life. We always want to make the perfect shot. We want to behave perfectly. We want to talk perfectly. We don't want to mess up. But if you veer right and you're under a tree, then what? Then you try to be a hero, and it backfires, which is what happened to me. Mm-hmm. And so Dr. Darden gave me the space to just be Erin and figure out who that was. And why are you scared of who you are? Like, what is that scares you the most?
Dig into a little bit about what drove you there.
What drove me to
golf? I mean, we understand that was part of your dad's thing, but what was the part of life that you were running from?
My dad taught me golf, and it's what bonded us together. And I was admired by everybody on the golf course. I've got a perfect swing. My left arm is the straightest left arm you'll see. I have a finesse of it. And so it gave me the attention that I wanted so desperately from my twin sister, my mom, my stepdad, the friends that my sister had. I had no friends growing up. I was bullied. I was teased. I was tormented. I wanted to be noticed. I wanted someone just to see me, and nobody saw me. But when I was on the golf course, nobody could deny my existence because I was that good.
It fed you.
It did. It fed my ego.
Until the injury.
Until the injury.
Right? And then you start to starve again.
I did.
And that's when you were looking for the help, which a lot of people won't do, right?
No.
They'll just keep on going south, and it makes it worse every time. That's why it says your book and your story is important. People need to hear these things, right? Because it's really easy to be on top, but it's really hard to be on the bottom.
The bottom sucks.
Bottom always
Who
sucks.
wants to be on the bottom? And
So what happened after that? After the injury? Tell us how you started your road to recovery.
I just kept going to counseling. But when he'd hit like a nerve, when there was something I needed to sit with internally by myself, I would not schedule another session with him. He'd be like, let's schedule a session. I'm like, my schedule's busy. I got all this stuff going on. He's like, okay, Erin, well, let us know when, you have time. I said, okay. But he knew I was pissed. I was mad and I was angry because he unpacked something that I didn't know that I was struggling with, but two, that I really needed to like sit down with and deal with. And so I'd get really angry, and he knew, but he knew I'd always come back. So I'd go back and we would unpack it, and him telling me to join an organization really helped. It helped me have a sense of purpose again. I became a leader. I became the president of that organization for the 4 years in college. I had no idea that I had speaking skills, let alone leadership skills. But that gave me something to focus on. And then when I could get back to golf, if I could get back to golf, then I had something else. We all focus on a plan A, but there's also B through Z. So if plan A doesn't work out, we still have 24, 25.
You didn't feel that at the time.
I did not, because plan A was my whole life's work. I was going to be a woman in the golf industry and dominate it and break the glass ceiling. Like nothing was going to get in my way. But I got in my own way because I couldn't see outside of the blinders.
You think in some way that was divine intervention hurting your hand?
Oh, I totally agree. Absolutely. Divine intervention.
If that doesn't happen, where are you now?
Right. If that didn't happen, where would I be? I'd be working for the PGA somewhere in this country. I mean, I did work for the PGA. I actually did end up working for the PGA for Colorado for a little while. But I mean, I probably wouldn't have understood that I had leadership skills and speaking skills. And I probably would have never written a book. We probably wouldn't be sitting here today having this conversation if that injury didn't happen. That injury was the best thing that could have happened to me.
Yeah, even though it was your worst day in your life.
It was.
I think that's the focus of the talk, right? It's like sometimes the worst things that happen to you, the best thing that ever happened to you. And it's hard to feel that. It's hard to absorb it.
You don't know that for years, though.
It does take a while, right?
Yeah,
to process that information. But the whole reason that we do these shows is to show people that it really shouldn't take years. You just got to listen to people. And sometimes it's hard to listen to people. Sometimes we want to have that internal dialogue. It feeds us in other ways and makes us feel a certain way. But really, that internal dialogue is everybody's story. Everybody's got that story, whether it's a wrist injury, whether it's whatever. I mean, everybody's got a story. But you don't want to waste a ton of years. Is that why you wrote the book?
I wrote the book because 250 student athletes showed up to hear me. It wasn't mandatory. They were encouraged by their coaches. They were encouraged by the school. Hey, come and hear this alumna, speak her story, tell her story about how she navigated life, as a student athlete. And when at first I didn't think anybody was going to show up. I was like, who's going to show up to hear little old me? Now, I had been a speaker for years before that on a different topic. This was new. I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. Like, I was a bodybuilder for 8 years, and I could stand on stage with hundreds of people looking at me in a sparkly itty bitty bikini with 5-inch heels and be fine. Like, I dominated that stage. But having 250 student athletes show up specifically to hear my story because they too were struggling scared me to death. And I love being on stage. I was shocked that many people showed up. So when I saw that and there were people in the audience crying, laughing, speechless, I was like, okay, well, maybe there's something here. And then I went to dinner with my friend, Emily Diaz. She's amazing. She's actually in my second book, The Badass Within. We went to dinner and she goes, Erin, you've got your next book. I said, what? She goes, I think you need to write your next book. I was like, well, what would I call it? The Blue Chair. So that was the original title, was The Blue Chair, but nobody knew what that meant. So it got changed by my cover designer, believe it or not. So that's why I wrote the book, because Emily at dinner told me I didn't know. I said, what do you mean you didn't know? She goes, I didn't know there was an option for me too. Because 20 years prior, she had left everything out on the soccer field and walked away from her college scholarship as a soccer player because she had an injury and she didn't know. So she pushed me to write the book. And then understanding that there was an uptick in counseling, it's like, people need to hear this story. They need to know you are so much more.
It is. It's a fantastic story because, mental health is an issue in our country today and probably all over the world. And in that, again, that whole life balance and the balance of the way things, but it's really that bounce back. It's a bounce back. This is why I love running these stories. This is why I love Truth Talks, right? We bring on people, tell their story, and it's for someone else to hear, right? Because sometimes it's way harder for us to hear it ourselves. But sometimes it's the first time a person's ever actually heard their own story when they tell it for the first time. That's when it's the most impactful, typically. Where do you want to take? When people read your book, what do you want them to take from it?
I want them to know, regardless if you're an athlete, if you're a mom, a dad, a doctor, a surgeon, an addict, whatever it may be, you are so much more than that. You are more than any of your challenges, your pitfalls, your successes, your achievements. I mean, I've got 11 or 13 trophies of bodybuilding, and I've got medals from golf, and I've got, I've been on stages, I've been in papers. I mean, I was a local celebrity in high school, and I'm so much more than that. I'm a human being, and we're on this planet to love one another, to relate to one another, and be there for one another, to be kind. And we don't need to put so much focus and energy into how can I show up and show out, basically, like, oh, look at all these things I've done, hey, I'm just me, minus the titles.
Give me your top 3 people that made you just you.
Well, God, first and foremost. Me. I have to, at the end of the day, I have to be okay with who I am. And Dr. Darden, but / Coach Capra. I can't really split them. I mean, they were my team that were literally my driving force of understanding I'm so much more than my sport. Without those 2 men in my life, I don't think I would be the person I am today. But my dad, I can't really limit to 3, but if I really had a limit to 3, it'd be God, me, and my dad, because my dad led me to golf.
Here's what it's always interesting though. What about the first therapist? Had she never said, hey, this is not for me, you got to go to this next one? Again, your life is different.
Yeah, I mean, she recognized that she did not have the experience with athletes, and she wasn't the right fit. I mean, I do have to credit her for, she wasn't abandoning me, but I felt abandoned. Mm-hmm. But she was just leading me in the right direction so I could understand where I needed to go.
Sounds like a damn good therapist.
She was, yeah. No, and Dr. Darden and I, we still talk today. I actually saw him when I was out in Kansas City in May, and we talked about it. We always reminisce and talk about the different things. And he goes, she did the right thing. And I said, I know, but it still didn't mean it didn't hurt, because I had been abandoned and rejected by so many people in my life. It was a familiar feeling. I couldn't see that she wasn't rejecting me. She was leading me, but I felt rejected because that's what I was used to. Oh, somebody's rejecting me again. But she did the right thing.
Tell us where you're at in your life right now.
Oh, so many different things. So I do keynote corporate speaking based off this topic, You Are More. I've done speaking on domestic violence and sexual assault in the past. I still will do that when I'm called to do that. But I really am focusing on the You Are More. I think that mental health has been a taboo subject for a long time here in America. I'm probably internationally. I'm not really familiar with international, but I grew up with a mother who suffered mental illness. She was severely depressed, manic. And my mother abandoned me many times. And I didn't like what her mental health issues did to her. And I always told myself that I would never be depressed and I would never struggle. And I would never admit that I struggled mentally because of what I witnessed as a child. So I've had to come to terms with, hey, I have been depressed. I have suffered from mental health issues. So talk about reflecting. I want people to know that mental health isn't a taboo subject. It needs to be talked about more. We need to open up instead of just saying, I've got it all together and I'm strong. How many times do we meet people and people ask, hey, how are you? And you say, I'm fine. If you ask me how I'm doing, I'm going to tell you the truth. And then people are like, oh man, I wish I didn't ask. And I'm like, but I'm not okay. And it's okay not to be okay. We need to open that dialogue. So my focus is to really open the dialogue of we all struggle. We all have moments. I mean, I don't know if people know this, but 1 in 6 young adults suffer with a major depression in their youth at one point in their life. And 1 in 5 adults suffer from mental illness in any given year.
But the reason I love these things is because I don't know. I would have given you different advice. I like the blue chair. I think it's significant for a reason, right? And because I can picture that girl curled up with her head in there, right? We've all been there.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, I've almost feel like I've seen that picture somewhere before. But I like that. I like that idea, right? And it signifies a lot of things, right? It was actually your new beginning was sitting in that chair all balled up,
Mm-hmm.
if you will, meeting the right people in your life. You got to get the right people. And usually the right people, sometimes they don't look like us. Sometimes they're quite different than us, right? And sometimes they say the stuff that we don't really want to hear. That's usually the right person. Yeah, it's usually the right person, And this is why I always appreciate somebody coming on the show and telling us their stories because it's there's somebody listening that needed to hear it, right? I mean, you had 200 and some people there, right? And there's people crying, there's people whatever. They're going through the same thing, maybe a different outcome. But your outcome's good.
Yeah.
Life is good.
Absolutely.
Are you still good at golf?
Oh, I'm phenomenal. I'm awesome. I shot at 83 the other day. And I played in a CGA event with my good friend Gina, a team of 4. And we got, technically it's second, but we got third because 2 teams tied for first. So
I'm going to ask you a question now, though, that might rattle you just a little bit. I hope it does. What's golf mean now?
Oh, that's a tough one because it's hard to detach myself from the past meaning of golf. It's still like in my past, it was my rock. It was my consistency. It was the one thing I could control, the one thing that I had for me. But now it's something I share with so many other people. Gina Werner, we met through our bowling league, and her and I we're golf besties. We have the same game. We have the same demeanor. We say the same thing at the same time, and we just have fun with it. I'm in a golf league, and I've got like 40 mamas because I used to be the youngest. I'm not the youngest anymore. It's fine. I'm fine. Not really, but it's going to be okay. I just like to have fun. I am competitive. I'm a very competitive person, but when it comes to playing golf, I just want to see, do I still have what it takes? Can I still make that superhero shot, but not let my ego get in the way? Can I have fun with it? Can I let my guard down and just enjoy the game?
But where it was once your identity.
It was.
What is it now?
My identity?
Still your identity?
No. Golf is something I enjoy. I teach the game. I like to pour into others with it. It's part of who I am. I wouldn't say it's my whole identity because the problem with our identity, though, is we wrap ourselves in other things. Because I felt like golf betrayed me when in 2008, I felt like it betrayed me. So I stepped away from it. I came back to it a few years later, and I went into bodybuilding, and I was a bodybuilder. So when we introduced ourselves, and I am.
Did bodybuilding betray you?
Bodybuilding?
Yeah.
No. Somebody in the industry said something to me, and so I decided to retire and hang up the sparkly shoes. But I'm Erin, the figure competitor. Oh, I'm Erin, the golf teaching professional. Oh, I'm Erin, the author. It's really hard for me to just say, I'm Erin. And I happen to play golf. I happen to lift weights. I happen to be a woman who struggled with infertility. I happen to be a woman who is a survivor of domestic violence. It's really hard to understand that we are not defined by our circumstances. And that was what I used to talk about with my first book, From Beaten to Badass, is that we're not defined by our circumstances. We are a badass. We just have to get back up. And that's a choice that we have to make. Because many people, when they hear my story, growing up and the different stories that I've now told in 4 different books and 6 other books, how did you become who you are? Like, why didn't you fall into alcohol? Why didn't you fall into drugs? I didn't know I could. I didn't know. Nor did I want to. Dare scared the living daylights out of me in 2nd grade, but I didn't know there was an option. I thought I had to hold it together because people were telling me I wasn't enough, and my God, I was gonna prove it. So my identity, I struggle on a daily basis, and then at the end of the day, I just have to realize I'm Erin, and that's okay, and that's enough. And everybody likes who Erin is, hopefully,
Well, I tell you what, this is a fantastic story. I love it. You have a lot of books. We're going to post all these on our deal so people can go to it. Fascinating story. Fantastic story. Here's how I want to end this. Let's end it with, I am Erin.
I am Erin.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on our show. I appreciate you. We hope that everybody goes out, buy these books. What an incredible story that she has, full of faith, motivation, everything that you need to start really addressing yourself and who you are. And I believe there's a lot of golden gems in here that can change your life. Erin, thank you so much for coming on our show. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Dr. Mensch.
You're
Appreciate
so welcome.
Thank you so much.